I never thought I'd be writing here, but life has a way of throwing stories at you that sound more like bad TV dramas than reality. For context, I, 32M, grew up in a family where the business was the family. My parents owned a mid-sized distribution company that supplied restaurants and small grocery chains across our state. From the time I was a teenager, I was stocking shelves, loading trucks, and later handling office work. I poured my entire 20s into that business. While my friends were traveling, experimenting, and figuring out who they were, I was working 70-hour weeks trying to keep the company afloat when the market shifted. My father used to say, "Someday, all this will be yours." And I believed him. I believed every late night and every sacrifice would eventually pay off. The only issue, my younger brother, Kyle, 29M, he was the complete opposite of me. Lazy, entitled, the type of guy who would show up late, leave early, and still somehow get praised just for existing. While I was negotiating contracts with suppliers, he was managing the social media page, aka posting memes during work hours. I thought my parents saw the difference. I thought they had to, but apparently, blood is thicker than sweat. 2 years ago, I was called into my parents' office. I was expecting a talk about restructuring after a rough quarter. Instead, I got blindsided. They told me they had to make tough financial decisions, and that my salary was too much of a burden. Translation, I was fired. From the company I had basically built up with my own hands. The kicker? Kyle stayed. Not only did he stay, but my parents promoted him to operations director. The guy can't even keep track of his own rent payments, and suddenly he's in charge of millions in contracts? I remember walking out of that office in a daze. I wasn't angry at first, just numb. All those years, all that loyalty, and in the end I was disposable. That day changed everything for me, because if my parents saw me as nothing more than an expense, then maybe it was time to stop sacrificing for them. The first few weeks after being fired were some of the darkest of my life. Imagine waking up every morning for over a decade with a purpose. Then suddenly, nothing. I didn't just lose a job. I lost my entire identity. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they really couldn't afford me. Maybe it wasn't personal. But that illusion shattered when I heard through old coworkers that Kyle had gotten a raise. A raise, while I was left scrambling to pay rent on my tiny apartment because I had foolishly reinvested most of my savings back into the family legacy. The betrayal started to sink in. My parents didn't just cut me out. They replaced me with someone they knew couldn't handle the responsibility. And yet, they acted like it was the natural order of things. Bloodline loyalty, as long as it wasn't to me. I tried confronting them once. I showed up at the office, sat across from my father, and asked, "After everything I've done, do you really think Kyle can do this without me?" He didn't even flinch. He said, "Kyle has the right vision for where we're going. You'd hold us back." That sentence broke something in me. I stopped calling. I stopped showing up for Sunday dinners. I stopped being the good son. If they wanted Kyle to be their golden boy, fine. They could deal with the fallout. But cutting ties with the only world I'd known left me in freefall. I spent nights lying awake wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I had wasted my 20s for nothing. Still, anger has a strange way of fueling you. While grief paralyzed me, rage kept whispering, "Prove them wrong." So I started small. I dusted off my resume, reached out to contacts, and, to my surprise, found that people respected the work I had done. Within 3 months, I landed a job at a competitor. Not glamorous, not high-level, but a foothold. And for the first time, I wasn't working for my parents' approval. I was working for me. I didn't know it then, but that was the first brick in a very different empire. Starting at the competitor felt strange. I went from being the boss's son with years of authority to just another mid-level manager at a company that had no reason to trust me yet. And honestly, it was exactly what I needed. For once, nobody saw me as the heir apparent or the disposable expense. I was just Mark, the guy who showed up early, stayed late, and knew the logistics industry inside and out. My new boss, Linda, was skeptical at first. She told me, "You've got family business stink on you. People assume you coasted your way here." Prove them wrong. Challenge accepted. I threw myself into the work. I streamlined inventory systems that were bleeding money, renegotiated supplier contracts, and trained staff in more efficient routing methods. Within 6 months, our division's margins were up 18%. Linda called me into her office and said, "Okay, maybe you're not just some nepotism baby." That was the closest thing to praise I'd heard in years, and it felt better than anything my father had ever said. Meanwhile, I kept hearing whispers about my parents' company. The same problems I used to warn them about were cropping up. Late deliveries, lost clients, supplier disputes. Apparently Kyle was more interested in expanding brand presence than actually keeping the wheels turning. He was throwing money at flashy marketing campaigns while contracts slipped through his fingers. Part of me felt smug. Another part of me ached. This was still my family, my blood, and watching them dig their own grave hurt more than I wanted to admit. But I had no time to wallow. At my new company, I was climbing. Promotions came faster than I expected. A year in, I was leading an entire regional division. By year 2, I was sitting in executive meetings helping shape long-term strategy. And somewhere along the way, something shifted in me. I stopped seeing myself as the abandoned son and started seeing myself as a builder. Not of my parents' dream, but of my own. Still, deep down, I carried a quiet thought that I never voiced aloud. One day, they'll regret letting me go. And sooner than I realized, that chance was coming. 2 years into my new job, I had gone from the outsider hire to someone whose opinion carried weight in the boardroom. Linda, my once skeptical boss, started bringing me to meetings with investors. She said I had a knack for seeing risks others ignored. What she didn't know was that skill had been sharpened by years of cleaning up behind my brother. While I was rising, I kept hearing more about my family's company. Competitors talk, suppliers gossip, and in our industry, word travels fast when someone's struggling. Apparently, Kyle had doubled down on his vision. He spent absurd amounts of money renovating the office, upgrading to the newest trucks that they couldn't actually afford, and hiring his college buddies into cushy management roles. The contracts I had once worked tirelessly to secure, one by one, they were slipping away to other distributors. Some even came to us. I can't lie. The first time I signed a deal with a client who used to be ours, I felt a wave of vindication so strong it almost scared me. But there was also guilt. These were the same people my parents had built their lives around. My mom had once told me she considered her clients extended family. And now, those clients were walking through my office doors because her chosen heir couldn't deliver. I never reached out. Not yet. Pride kept me silent. So did anger. But every time I looked at the quarterly reports and saw the numbers climbing, I thought, if they hadn't fired me, this growth could have been theirs. Then came the rumors. Word was my parents' company was close to defaulting on a major loan. Suppliers were demanding upfront payments. Deliveries were late more often than not. Employees were jumping ship. And just like that, my quiet fantasy, the one where they realized they had made a huge mistake, started inching closer to reality. Because in business, vultures circle when there's blood in the water. And I was no longer the abandoned son. I was one of those vultures, whether I admitted it or not. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, in the middle of reviewing a new contract proposal. My phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in over a year, my mom's. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. My chest tightened in a way I didn't expect. We hadn't spoken since the confrontation in my father's office, when they told me I was holding the company back. Part of me wanted to decline the call, but some mix of curiosity and old habit made me swipe answer. Her voice was softer than I remembered, almost shaky. "Mark, honey, we need to talk." I didn't say much, just let her fill the silence. She explained that things at the company weren't going well. Contracts were drying up. Suppliers were demanding advance payments they couldn't afford. Employees were leaving faster than they could hire replacements. And then she said it. The words I'd secretly dreamed of hearing, though not in the way I imagined. "We need your help." I felt a cocktail of emotions, vindication, anger, even a twisted sort of satisfaction. After all the years of being told I wasn't good enough, suddenly I was the lifeline. But beneath it all, there was also bitterness. Because she didn't call to apologize. She didn't say, "We were wrong about you." She said, "We need you." I asked her bluntly, "Why not Kyle? He's the director, isn't he?" Her pause was long enough to answer the question for me. Finally, she admitted, "Kyle, he's trying. But this is bigger than him. He's not you." That hit like a knife twisted in my chest. Now, when the house was burning down, they suddenly remembered the son they discarded. I told her I'd think about it. Hung up. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus. Part of me wanted to rush over to prove I could save what they couldn't. Another part of me screamed that this was exactly the trap. Me stepping back into the role of the dutiful son while they handed Kyle all the praise. That night, I poured myself a drink and stared at the ceiling for hours. For the first time since being fired, the power was in my hands. And I wasn't sure yet if I wanted to use it to save them or bury them. After that call, I couldn't think straight. Every part of me was at war. On one hand, this was everything I'd ever wanted, proof that they needed me, that I was the one holding everything together all along. On the other, the wound from being discarded was still raw. I ended up confiding in two people. First was Jenna, a close friend I'd met at my new company. She had no filter, which is why I trusted her. After I laid out the situation, she didn't even hesitate. "Mark, don't be an idiot. They tossed you aside for your brother. And now that he's sinking the ship, they want you to patch the holes? No, let them drown." Her bluntness stung, but I couldn't deny the logic. The second person I talked to was Linda, my boss. She listened carefully, then leaned back in her chair and said, "You're in a rare position. You don't just have personal stakes, you've got leverage. If they want your help, make sure it's on your terms." She wasn't telling me to burn bridges. She was telling me to build them so that I was the one controlling the toll. Still, when I lay awake at night, the personal side drowned out the professional. These were my parents. The people who raised me, who I once believed would always have my back. Could I really sit by and watch their life's work collapse? But then I'd remember the look on my father's face the day he fired me. Cold, unflinching, as if cutting me out was nothing more than trimming fat from a budget. I wanted to help. I wanted to hurt. I wanted both. After a week of torment, I decided I'd meet with them, not as the desperate son begging for approval, but as a man they underestimated. If they wanted my help, they'd see me not as the expense, but as the one holding the keys to their survival. For the first time, I wasn't walking into their office as family. I was walking in as their last option, and I intended to make them feel it. Walking back into my parents' office felt surreal. The same place where I'd once been fired now looked smaller, dimmer, almost desperate. The fancy renovations Cal had pushed for were there. Sleek furniture, oversized flat screens, but they couldn't hide the stress hanging in the air. My father looked older, my mother thinner. Kyle, though, sat in the big chair with a smug expression, like he was still in control. "Mark," my mom said, standing as if nothing had happened. "It's so good to see you." I didn't hug her. I didn't shake my father's hand. I sat down across from them, calm but deliberate. "So, you said you needed my help." The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, my dad sighed. "We're in a difficult position. Some bad contracts, some mistakes. We thought with your experience, maybe you could guide us out of it." Guide us? As if I hadn't been tossed aside like trash. I kept my tone even. "You mean guide Kyle out of it?" Kyle bristled instantly. "Hey, I've been running this company just fine. We just hit a few bumps." I almost laughed. A few bumps? The company was hemorrhaging. "Here's the thing," I said, leaning forward. "If you want my help, it's not going to be me cleaning up while Kyle keeps the title. I'm not here to babysit him. I run things my way or I don't run them at all." The room went still. My mother's lips parted in shock. My father's jaw clenched. Kyle turned red. "You can't just walk in here and make demands," Kyle snapped. "This is my company now." I looked him dead in the eye. "Then you can watch your company go bankrupt." For once, he had no comeback. My father rubbed his temples. Mark, we're not here to fight. We're asking you to be reasonable. I almost lost it. Reasonable? Where was their reason when they fired me? When they gave everything to Kyle? But I kept my composure. I am being reasonable. You want me back, these are the terms. I take over operations. Full control. No interference. Otherwise, you figure it out yourselves. The air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, my mother whispered, "We'll need time to discuss. Take all the time you want," I said, standing. "But time is the one thing you're running out of." I walked out, heart pounding, adrenaline surging. For the first time in years, I held the power. And judging by the look on Kyle's face, he knew it too. I didn't expect an answer right away, but I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, my mother called again. Her tone was hesitant, almost pleading. "Mark, your father thinks we should accept your terms. But Kyle—" She stopped, sighing. "Kyle feels betrayed. He says you're trying to steal what's his." I almost laughed. His? The kid who couldn't balance a checkbook suddenly felt entitled to the entire company just because they handed it to him? "What do you think?" I asked. There was a pause. Then quietly, "I think we don't have a choice." It was the closest thing to an admission I'd ever get from her. That night, I got a different call, this time from Kyle himself. His voice was filled with venom. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Coming in here, acting like you're the savior. You're just jealous because Dad picked me." I let him rant. Years ago, those words would have gutted me. Now, they just sounded hollow. When he finally stopped, I said, "Jealous? No. I'm just not willing to let you drag everything into the ground. If you think you can fix it, go ahead. But don't expect me to clean up your mess while you sit in the big chair." He hung up without another word. The next morning, I got an email from my father. No greeting, no pleasantries, just one line. "We'll accept your terms. When can you start?" I stared at the screen for a long time. This was it. The moment I dreamed of since they fired me. The tables had turned. But as the adrenaline faded, something else crept in, doubt. Did I really want to save them? After everything? Or was there another path? One where I didn't just return as their last resort, but built something bigger on my own? Because at my competitor's office, there were whispers too. Whispers about acquisition, about buying out struggling companies to expand. And one of the names on that list? My parents' business. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just choosing between family and revenge. I was choosing between stepping back into their world or erasing it entirely. When I walked back into their office for the official meeting, the air was tense. My father looked tired, my mother anxious. Kyle wouldn't even meet my eyes. They slid papers across the table, financial statements, contracts, projections. It was worse than I thought. They weren't just struggling. They were weeks away from collapse. "We need you, Mark," my father said. His voice carried none of the authority it once had. "You know this business better than anyone. You can still turn it around." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled out a different folder, one with the logo of my current company stamped on the corner. "What's that?" Kyle asked, suspicion flickering in his eyes. I opened it slowly, letting the silence build. Inside were acquisition documents, draft proposals my company had drawn up to buy their business. Their business. The one I had bled for, then been cast out of. My father's face went pale. My mother covered her mouth. Kyle shot to his feet. "This is a joke, right? Tell me this is a joke." "It's not," I said evenly. "Your company is failing. We both know it. And my company, where I've been for the last few years, sees value in what's left. So you've got two options. You accept me back under my terms or you sell. Either way, I win." The room erupted. Kyle shouted about betrayal, calling me a snake. My father demanded to know how I could do this to family. My mother just sat there, tears in her eyes. I let them rage. Then, when the noise died down, I leaned forward and said, "Do you remember the day you fired me? You told me I was holding you back. That Kyle had the right vision. That I wasn't good enough. Well, here we are. How's his vision working out for you?" No one answered. For the first time, they saw me not as the son they dismissed, but as the man holding their future in his hands. And I wasn't sure yet if I wanted to save them or bury them. I sat back and watched the room crumble in silence. My parents, who once held all the power, now looked helpless. Kyle, who once acted untouchable, now trembled in the shadow of my presence. I could have stepped in, taken control, fixed the contracts, rebuilt relationships, breathed life back into the company they had abandoned me from. I could have been the hero, but the memory of every late night, every sacrifice, every time I was ignored while Kyle lounged around, burned inside me. Loyalty had its price, and I had already paid mine. I made my decision. I called Linda. It's time. Proceed with the acquisition. The words were sharp, clean, final. I hung up and faced my parents. You've got your answer, I said. Your company will be absorbed into ours. My terms are non-negotiable. I'm not here to rescue anyone. I'm here to lead. The look on their faces was a mix of shock, fear, and, I think, a tiny sliver of regret. Kyle didn't say a word. My father's jaw tightened. My mother's tears fell freely. I walked out of that office for the last time as their son, and never looked back. In the end, I didn't just survive their betrayal, I turned it into power. Some would call it cruel. Some would say I overstepped. But I call it finally being seen. So Reddit, AITA,